Connected to cloud server. Okay, preparing.
Yeah.
Recording.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we're recording.
No, I like
Yeah,
this.
the sources are in the chat window, and
No, they're not. They're not in the window.
they're not in the chat window. Okay, well, I'll put them there again. Let's see. File. Okay. Thank you all for bearing with us. We're trying. Here, I uploaded the source sheets to the chat window. Everyone see that? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to share them on the screen. I'll share my screen with all of you. Okay? What makes this Pesach different from all others? The truth is everything's different. Everything has changed. The entire world has changed. And Pesach, which is the holiday of questions, the Mishnah and the Gemara explain that that's how we are supposed to fulfill the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, by asking and answering questions. The Mishnah says, Haben Shoel, the son asks. In fact, one explanation of the Gemara of Lachma Anya, of what we call the bread of affliction, the bread of poverty, is not the bread of affliction, Lachma Anya, but Lechem She'onim alav dvarim harbe. Onim, a bread that we answer a lot of questions with, a bread that makes us ask and answer questions, and we relate the story of the Exodus from Egypt through that matzah. And typically a rabbi gets a lot of questions before Pesach. Rabbi, I forgot, how do I kasher this? Rabbi, can I kasher this? Rabbi, is this considered kitnios? And this year the questions are very different. Rabbi, how do we daven? Can we have a minyan via Zoom? What about a Pesach Seder via Zoom so that we can be together with our grandchildren? Rabbi, how do we do Tvilas Kalim? How do we immerse our new utensils in the mikvah? Is it even safe to do that? Rabbi, how should we take care of mechiras chametz this year? Can we sell our chametz virtually or digitally? Is that enough? Rabbi, how do we burn the chametz this year? All sorts of questions, and also questions of life and death. Rabbis in the United States are being asked questions like, can we remove this elderly individual who is going to pass away from a ventilator so that we can give it to a younger person who has a chance to live because they have a shortage of ventilators? Rahman al-Islam. Or questions like the rabbis in Europe are facing, in certain countries in Europe, where there's a suggestion that they're going to require cremation. Rabbi, does halacha allow for cremation in order to prevent the spread of infection? I mean, awful questions, difficult questions. Questions like, how do you perform a tahara? Is it safe to perform a tahara? What about kvura? I've heard some awful stories already. The Chevra Kadishas are overwhelmed. The funeral homes in the United States, the New York area, are overwhelmed. How do you perform a kvura? What about shiva? Do you sit shiva? And these are tough questions, but they're not new questions. Because unfortunately, Klal Yisrael has experienced pandemics and plagues and pogroms before. And so I'd like to explore together with you this evening a number of responses from some of the great rabbis, the great Poskim, how they responded to plagues and pandemics throughout Jewish history, and maybe we'll get a little perspective on what our response should be, and maybe toch kedei we'll also get a little chizuk. So let's begin with the Gemara and see how Chazal, how the rabbis of the Gemara responded to some of these challenges. So we begin with a braita that appears in Masechet Bava Kama on Daf Samach Amud Bet. I'm going to put here the source sheets. I'm going to share my screen with you so that we could look at these source sheets together. Okay? Let me figure out how to do this. Okay, here we go. Okay. Does everyone see the source sheets?
Yeah, they sing in big versions.
They should be in the center of the screen. Everyone see? Yeah? Tanu Rabbanan? Okay. Here. So it's interesting, a few weeks ago when this whole story with Corona really began here, my son had a Gemara test, which was subsequently pushed off, on Pikua'ch, a very popular Lumdisha Gemara in Bava Kama, and it's taught in many yeshivos. So my eldest son, my 16-year-old, said, "Abba, can you learn with me for the test?" I said, "Sure, anything." My son finally wants to learn with me. Okay, and we're learning through a number of different dapim, a number of pages in Pikua'ch, and we come to this very Gemara here at source number 1. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught. It's a braita. Dever ba'ir, when there's a plague in the city, the Gemara says, "Kanes raglecha." This is what our Chachamim instruct. Take your feet in, meaning do not leave the house. The Gemara advises a lockdown. This is nothing new. Shenemar, as it says, and it's so interesting, look at the pasuk that Chazal bring here. It's incredible. Vatem lo teitzu ish mi petach beito ad boker. Where's this pasuk from? Anyone know? You can unmute yourselves. Any suggestions? Any volunteers?
Sounds like it's.
Right,
It's from Parshat Bo. Who is that? Mati?
Zel Reinfeld.
Oh, okay. Shkoyach. It's from Parshat Bo, from Makat Bechorot. The Torah there says in Perek Yudbet, Shmot Yudbet Pasuk Chav Bet Ulakachtem Agulut Ezov Tvaltem Badam. Take this hyssop and put it into the blood, etc., etc., etc. Put it on your lintels. Put it on your doorposts, and what? And don't leave the house. Isn't that incredible? That Chazal chose this pasuk. It's incredible. Here we are, right before Pesach, and we're also stuck. Well, the Jews in Mitzrayim, as they prepared to leave Egypt, they also were quarantined. They were also in lockdown. So the Gemara then continues and brings 2 other psukim, 2 other verses. Ve'omer, and it also says, Lech ami, bo v'chadarecha, usgor ba'adecha. Go, my people, enter into your rooms and close the door behind you. Again, quarantine, lockdown. This is a pasuk from Yeshayahu, Perek Chaf Vav. Ve'omer, and another pasuk, finally a third pasuk. Michutz tishakel cherev umichadarim ema. On the outside, there's the sword, pasuk from Devarim, the sword of the angel of death, and indoors, there's dread. So the Gemara asks the question: why do we need all 3 psukim? Why isn't it sufficient just with that first pasuk? Why does the Gemara bring all these psukim? What's with the ve'omer? Ve'omer. What does that come to teach? And so the Gemara asks, "My ve'omer, what's the reason behind this ve'omer?" So the Gemara says, "V'chi tema hani mili belelia," lest you say what? That maybe you only have to stay in at night, aval bimamalo, but during the day, what? That during the day I don't have to stay inside. Tashma, what does it say? We bring this pasuk from Yeshayahu. Lech ami bo b'chadarecha uzgor dilatecha. Go into your homes, close the doors behind you. In other words, when was Makat Bechorot? It was at night. So the Gemara is saying, you know why you need this extra pasuk, this pasuk from Yeshayahu Perek Chavav, to teach you that, lest you say, you know what, maybe I'll stay in at night, but during the day I'll venture out of the house. No. The Gemara says, stay at home day and night. So the Gemara brings this second pasuk. V'chi tema, what now? Maybe you say, now we're going to ask, why do you need that third pasuk? Because maybe you might say, what? If you say, Hani mile deleka ema migavai. Maybe this only applies when there's no fear in the home. No fear in the home. No dread in the home. No, let's use contemporary terms, modern language, no anxiety in the home. But maybe when there is dread in the home, fear in the home, anxiety in the home, when people are nervous, so maybe if I just had the first pasuk and maybe even the second pasuk, so I might think, okay, so I'll go outside and be with people. if people in my home are anxious, if there's fear, so let me go outside and be together with other people. It's normal, right? It's not normal to be locked up in one's home with one's spouse and Baruch Hashem 6 children. It's challenging. The person's supposed to be outside interacting with people. And so the Gemara says, lest the person say, if there's fear in the home, let me venture out and be among people to calm myself down, to calm my nerves. Tashma, come and listen. Oh, that's why I need that third pasuk. Michutz tishakel cherev umichadarim ema. You know what? Inside, the pasuk says there might be fear, but outside there's the sword of the Malach HaMavis. Okay? So the Gemara says, Af al gav, the michadarim ema, even though there's fear indoors, michutz tishakel cherev. But outside, the sword will literally bereave. Okay? So what our sages are saying here is, I think, don't try to look for excuses. Don't go out. If there's a plague, stay inside. You see, it's very popular now in social media and on the internet, hashtag stay inside. There are other places, countries where they haven't enforced a lockdown. So people can choose to either go out and be in public or stay home. So they're encouraging people, but they haven't enforced the lockdown. Here in Israel, they've enforced the lockdown. But Chazal are saying, if there's a plague, don't go outside. If there's a plague, don't even go out at night. If there's a plague, don't say to yourself, you know what, maybe it's good for me to get out a little bit, get a little air, and be among people, because staying at home is causing me anxiety. The Gemara is saying, stay inside. And so the Gemara has to bring these 3 psukim, these 3 verses. And then the Gemara continues and just relates that Rava took this advice. Rava be'idan ritcha, when there was a plague, or literally at a time of divine anger. That's what ritcha means. Like something's boiling, right? Same language. At a time of divine anger, have sachar kave. Rashi explains he would close the windows. He would, close the doors, close the windows, seal the house. And the Gemara brings the pasuk, Ki ala mavet b'chalonenu, for death has ascended through our windows. Perhaps Chazal even understood, and we'll see an example of this maybe, or a number of examples in this next passage, Gemara in Ketubot. Chazal may have understood that disease can spread if you're among people, if you're outside. It's airborne. It can spread. They didn't have the medicine or the science that we have today, but they certainly understood with empirical evidence. They looked at the world around them and understood that people can contract illness if they're outside among people, or even if their windows are open and disease is airborne. Certainly they didn't have the understanding that we had today, but they took precautions. And you see that Chazal here, again, they based themselves on the science of times, based on what they understood, and they took precautions. And that's a very important point. That brings us to the Gemara in Ketubot on Daf Ayin Zayin, here in source number 2. Now the Mishnah there says that the Beit Din can force a husband to divorce his wife, give her a get, if he's mukashchin, if he's got boils, if he has polyphus, which the Gemara explains, he has awful breath, okay, really bad halitosis, I guess it's chronic, or he's involved in professions that are very stinky, like he's a leather tanner. As they used to use excrement to tan leather. I think still today, French leather makes use of excrement. There's certain enzymes in it that soften the leather. So this is grounds for divorce, okay? And it's in that context that the Gemara talks about what most likely is a skin illness, although based on Rashi's comments there, it sounds like it might also be neurological, but elsewhere, it sounds like it's a skin illness called ratan. It may even be leprosy. So there, the Gemara says as follows: Machriz Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan announced. He's haru mizvuvei shel ba'alei ra'atan. be careful with the zvuve, the flies that surround people who have this skin disease. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan understood that disease can be spread through flies. We know that disease can be spread through mosquitoes and other insects. But it's interesting. It doesn't say Amar Rabbi Yochanan. The language that the Gemara uses here is Machriz Rabbi Yochanan. He announced. This is a public health announcement that Rabbi Yochanan is making. Rabbi Zera, lo hava yatev bizike. The Gemara continues and relates that Rabbi Zera would not sit, as Rashi explains, in the same area as the wind of those people. In other words, he wouldn't want to breathe the same air. He believed that the disease was airborne. He wouldn't want to sit in proximity to them and breathe the same air. Rabbi Elazar lo ayel be'ole. Rabbi Elazar would not go into the individual's tent who was stricken with this illness. Why didn't he want to go into his tent? Again, he wanted to distance himself. Physical distance, social distance. He wouldn't go into his home. Again, this is quarantine. This is lockdown. Rabbi Asi lo havu achle mibei dahahi mevua. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi would not eat eggs from that alley, from that area, as the individual where he had his food, or where he shopped, or where he was selling his produce or his eggs. In other words, they were concerned that maybe the food was contaminated. Now again, the Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi have, the same type of understanding of infectious diseases we have today. I don't know, but they certainly based themselves on the medicine of the time, on the science of the time, and on, as I said before, empirical evidence, on what they observed. And if they observed that people together caught the disease and it could spread with, whether it's insect bites or whether it's through contact, physical contact, or it's airborne or contaminated food, an understanding that we have to take precautions. And I think it's significant that this passage begins Machriz Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan took responsibility to announce this. And you see how the great Chachamim here, Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, they set an example. Like Rabbi Yochanan, they told people what they were doing. Right? How do we know? How does the Gemara know why Rabbi Zera, didn't sit with this person? Or why Rabbi Elazar didn't go into the tent? Why Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi didn't eat those eggs? Because it was well known. Because they publicized it, like Rabbi Yochanan. But then the Gemara continues and relates how Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Michrach Behu, the Asik B'Torah. Now, what does that mean? Michrach Behu, the Asik B'Torah. So Asik B'Torah, we know, it means that he was involved in Torah. He was learning Torah, perhaps teaching Torah. Rashi explains Michrach Behu, Nidbak Etzlam, B'Shasho Sek B'Torah, that he would actually sit together with the sick people at the time when he was involved in Torah. Umoshivan Etzlo, Umuftachu Shetagin HaTorah Alav Velo Yuzak. He sat with them, and Rashi explains, based on language of the Gemara, we'll see in a moment, that he sat with them and felt confident that the Torah would protect him and that he would be okay. He would not be injured or damaged. He wouldn't become ill. Now, the Gemara continues, says, Amar, he quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, Perek Hey, that says, Ayelet Ahavim v'ya'alat chen, beloved Ayalim, gracious Elim, beautiful animals. So that is understood to be a reference to the Torah, how beautiful, how gracious the Torah is, how beloved the Torah is. And so he said, Imchein ma'ale alomdeha. If the Torah is gracious to the one who studies it, if the Torah provides grace for the individual, agune lo migna, shouldn't it also protect? Shouldn't it also provide protection? So based on Rashi's reading of the Gemara, it sounds like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was a little cavalier. He felt maybe invincible. He could sit with people, he could open his Gemara, and the Torah would protect him. Sounds an awful lot like, the Chevra that up until just a few days ago were keeping the yeshivas open until they were forcibly closed, and keeping the shuls open and making minyanim until the Gedolei Ador came out and told them it's usher to make minyanim. And they argued and they cried, will the Torah not protect us? And that's very difficult. It's very difficult because Ein Somchin al Hanes. We don't rely on miracles. Our Torah is a Torat Chaim. It's a living, breathing Torah that confronts the modern world and responds to its challenges, but also is a Torah that takes into consideration science and medicine. And we have to operate through Teva. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a God that operates through the natural order, through Teva. As Rabbi Rav Tendler often likes to say, Mother Nature has a father. And while we believe in complete faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have emunah and bitachon, faith and trust in God, we balance that with hishtadlut, with doing our part, our share. So how do we understand how Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi would sit among sick people and somehow feel that the Torah would protect him when we have an obligation to do our hishtadlut? And we say that you cannot rely on miracles. That's not the Torah way. That's not the Torah way. So Rashi's reading of this Gemara is very challenging. It's interesting. The Gemara then continues. I didn't put it on the source sheets, but if you take a look there on Ayin Zayin, I would bet the Gemara continues and relates about how when Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was on his deathbed, he had this interaction with the Malach HaMaves, with the angel of death. Is the Gemara trying to say that maybe Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi did the wrong thing, and then that led to his death? I don't know. I don't want to go that far and suggest that. But again, that approach, shouldn't the Torah alone protect us, is a challenge. And we're going to have to come back to that and understand, perhaps what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was doing. But let's first fast forward to the 19th century. Here I put a beautiful picture of one of the great Achronim, Rabbi Akiva Eger, who was in his day considered the Gadol Hador, by the great sages of the 18th and 19th centuries. He was really considered the Gadol Hador. He even the greatest rabbis, the Chasam Sofer and many others, were in correspondence with him because again he was viewed as the preeminent posek. And here I've put on the next page a letter that he wrote, Parshas Nitzavim, Taf Kuf Tzadi Aleph, 1830. When cholera had already reached Posen, where he was the Rav for the last 23 years of his life. Now, cholera is such an awful, awful disease. It completely decimated Europe and Asia in the 19th and into the early 20th centuries. Even in undeveloped countries today, cholera still exists. Baruch Hashem, today there's treatment for it, but just an awful, awful disease. And the second epidemic, or the second cholera pandemic, was from 1826 to 1837. And it had reached Poland basically because of the Polish-Russian War. It first began in Asia, spread to Russia, and the Russian soldiers brought it with them over to Poland. And one of the questions that they faced, and that we faced this year, was, can we keep the shuls open? Or do we have to shut the shuls? Very, very relevant. The same question that we faced this year. I even mentioned this tshuva in shul, this letter that he wrote. This tshuva appears in in Igrot Rabbi Akiva, the collected letters of Rabbi Akiva Eger, as well as in his Chidushim to Masechet Nidarim. And interestingly, this letter was written to Rav Eliyahu Gutmacher, name that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Rav Eliyahu Gutmacher was the Rav and a Beis Din and Rosh Yeshiva in Pleshin. And he's considered one of the Mevasrei Tzion, one of the heralders of Zion, one of the early religious Zionist thinkers, or as the scholars like to call the proto-Zionists. And in fact, Kibbutz Dei Eliyahu, of course, is named for Rav Eliyahu Gutmacher. And they were in correspondence. So he writes to him, and the background that you need to know for this tshuva is that the government wanted to shut down the shuls, as is happening in certain parts of the world. Here too, eventually, the government said you have to shut down the shul. We shut down before the government, before the Misrad HaBriyut suggested it, because I felt that was the right choice to make. I was criticized by members of the shul. I was criticized by people who daven in the shul and are not members of our shul. But I think we made the right decision. So this was the question that they faced. And he writes here, Michtav shekatav bizman ha'magefa, a letter that was written at the time of the plague, as I said, cholera. Ubo more kama hu ra'ot eich umalit palel. And Rabbi Akiva Eger gives a number of instructions on how to daven. The kama hu ra'ot eich litnaheg b'inyanei achila, and how to even eat. Okay, we'll see in a moment. So he writes the following: Michtavot higiani, your letter reached me b'inyan tefila b'veit hakneset. Concerning davening in the shul, dati ze emet shakibutz b'makom tsar eino nachon. He says, I agree. It's true that getting together in a small confined area is not proper. It's dangerous. But you can daven in small groups. Around 15 people at a time. Right? Maybe also leave, as the Misrad HaBriyut suggested, 2 meters between people. Right? As we tried to do in the beginning. We said, okay, some people will daven downstairs and some people will daven on the second floor Ezras Nashim and on the third floor Ezras Nashim, and we'll keep the space. But eventually, we made the right decision to close. Yerushalayim, as I'm sure you know, is number 1 in infections of COVID-19. And as I saw, Har Nof is also up there in terms of one of the neighborhoods with the most cases within Yerushalayim. So he continues, you'll start to have 1 minyan and then another minyan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he says, well, and what if people don't follow the rules? Okay, just for the sake of time, I'll skip around a little bit. So again, the background to this tshuva is that there was a concern that the government was going to close the shul. So he writes, make sure people don't push, make sure too many people don't come inside. You can have a police officer even, to make sure that no one's fooling around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he writes that, you can tell the magistrate in my name that I instructed you this. I have some pull in the government. We'll see in a moment. Actually, Rabbi Akiva Eger himself had connections with the government and even was commended. He received some sort of commendation from the King of Prussia for his involvement in cholera and in trying to prevent the spread of the disease. So he writes that if the government prevents you, if they don't allow you to make these minyanim, he says, ubivadai tatzlichu im tazkiru shmi. They'll allow you, you will be matzliach, you'll be successful if you mention my name. She'izharti etchem, that I warned you or instructed you, shelo liot kibbutz gadol b'beit hakneset b'makom tzar, that you not gather big groups together in small confines. Okay? And you mentioned that I'll give you the following instructions, etc. And among the tefillot that we're going to say, also a tefillah for the melech. Okay, tefillah for the melech. I don't know if they said a tefillah for the king every Shabbat, if they started a special tefillah when the cholera plague broke out, or the pandemic broke out. So then he continues and gives some suggestions on tefillot that they should say, special tefillot that they should institute, and also just practical medical advice. He says, prevent yourself from becoming cold, and you should wear flannel on your stomach, flannel chagur al habeten. And I found it, it's interesting, I found in a number of articles about cholera that historically they wore these flannel belts because cholera is a gastrointestinal disease. And so they believe that you should keep your belly warm. And then he continues with things that you should avoid, foods you should avoid. Especially he writes, you should especially avoid pickled foods, which again, that was consistent with the medical advice. So here you have Rabbi Akiva Eger giving you both spiritual advice and also medical advice. He says something that I just want to find here. Unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to underline on the PDF when I transferred it to the file. It wouldn't work, but he writes the following, which I think is so important. I got a lot of chizuk out of this when I saw it. He says, "Shelo lidog ulaharchik kol minei atzvut." Says, you have to follow my advice. We're going to limit the amount of people who can daven in the minyan. We're going to be very careful. Don't let people crowd together. You're going to follow all this medical advice, wear the flannel, don't eat those foods. We're going to daven. Say these special Pirkei Tehillim, say these special tefillot, but also shelo lidog ularchik kol minei atzvut. Trust in God, don't worry, and distance yourself from all sorts of atzvut, all sorts of sadness and depression. Lo aleinu, a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people are suffering. Just the other day, I saw on the news there was an individual here in Israel in a hospital who was suffering from the illness, a young person, and he jumped out of the window. He didn't kill himself, he survived, but people are, this tremendous suffering going on. So it's interesting, Rabbi Akiva Eger, he's addressing our spiritual needs, but also he's addressing our medical needs. He's offering medical advice. Now, you could say, well, what role does a rabbi have in telling you to do this or do that? He's not a doctor. He didn't go to medical school. But as we're going to see together this evening, Dafka is the rabbi. Dafka is the rabbi who has to tell people to follow and to listen to the doctors and to follow the hanchayot and horaot of the Misad Habriyut. And unfortunately, we saw here over the past few weeks what happened when there were some rabbis who did not tell their chevra, their people, their flock, to follow the advice of the Misad Habriyut. And maybe even there were some who told their chevra not to listen. So take a look at source number 5. This is actually an interesting source, also about Rabbi Akiva Eger. And this comes from a sefer called Chut HaMishulash. You can see, do you see me in the chat window? You see me? Do you see my face? Not that you need to see me, but here's a sefer, a wonderful sefer called Chut HaMishulash. It's a wonderful sefer with all sorts of stories about Rabbi Moshe Sofer, the Chasam Sofer, Rabbi Akiva Eger, and the Ksav Sofer, the son of the Chasam Sofer, of Aram Shmuel Binyamin Sofer. Okay, it's about those three and about their lineage and their history and biography and divrei Torah and stories. It's really a wonderful sefer. So this, it's interesting. Why is Rabbi Akiva Eger included if it's about the Chasam Sofer and his son, and it was written by a descendant of the Chasam Sofer? And the answer is because
can I say something?
Sofer was married Bezivuk Sheni to Rabbi Akiva Eger's daughter, Bezivuk Sheni. The Chasam Sofer was a contemporary with Rabbi Akiva Eger. They were about the same age. But the Chasam Sofer married Bezivuk Sheni, the daughter of Rabbi Akiva Eger. So when he writes letters to him in his chubos, he uses all sorts of wonderful words. My beloved father-in-law, the genius, the light of Israel, etc., 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 all these honorifics. But he calls him his father-in-law because he was married, Bezivuk Sheni, to the daughter of Rabbi Akiva Eger. In any case, here in source number 5, I put an excerpt from the Sefer Chut HaMishulash. He writes the following: Bishnat Taf Kuf Tzadi Aleph, that's 1830, Ka'asher Shalta HaCholi Ra. Interesting. Here it's a play on words. Cholera, right? Cholera. Oh. They wrote it as Chole Ra. The awful, wicked illness. Rachmana litzlan, b'chol artzot Europa, gam sham bepozna, when it reached Pozna or Posen, where Rabbi Akiva Eiger was the Rav, naga machala harbe, v'az he flee, z'keini hagon zal me'od lasot chesed. When the plague reached Posen, Rabbi Akiva Eiger, he got involved himself in all sorts of chesed. He got involved doing all sorts of things for sick people. Bigufo, with his body. Ubimamono, and with his money. He also wrote Kabbalistic kameot and skulot, etc. He saved so many souls from descending into the pit, physically and spiritually. Okay? And he got a good name, a reputation, a renown for his actions, for his involvement in the cholera plague. Friedrich Wilhelm Hashlishi, Melech Prijan, the Prussian king, Friedrich Wilhelm III. V'hu katav cabinet schreiben im hakarat tova lo. He wrote I don't know what a cabinet schreiben is, some sort of commendation, some sort of declaration to give thanks, to give hakaras hatov, al hatov v'chesed shasa b'yamim hahem, for all the kindness, all the things that Rabbi Akiva Eiger had done in those days. And then the Sefer continues and actually gives you the language. We have the language. We have it preserved in the original German. Okay, this commendation that was written. So here we see that Rabbi Akiva Eiger himself not only advised people what to do, to follow the instructions of the doctors of the Ministry of Health of their days, advised them medically and spiritually as well, gave them chizuk, but also got involved with the sick himself, doing chesed, following the practical medical advice, giving chizuk, spiritual advice, how to daven, how to continue with minyanim in an appropriate way that the government will be okay, will sanction, giving them chizuk, what tefillos to say, what pirkei tehillim to say, but also chesed. This is what a rabbi is supposed to do. This is what a rabbi is supposed to do. But the question is, it would almost seem that, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Akiva Eiger here is endangering himself in this description. And there are other descriptions that appear in other Sfarim. I chose Chutam Mishulash because the typeface is a little easier to read, but there are other descriptions where you have details of how he really got involved with the sick and rolled up his sleeves. But it sounds like he put himself into a makom sakana. And we know that the halacha forbids an individual from placing himself in a makom sakana. It almost sounds like he was cavalier, maybe, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, put himself in danger. How do we understand this? How do we reconcile this? How do we understand how Rabbi Akiva Eiger was involved with people? The descriptions how he's pulling people up out of the street in other Sfarim. I think the answer is found in this next source here, in source number 6, from the Sefer Nefesh Harav, from Rav Hershel Shechter, one of the Rosh Yeshiva in YU, and major Posek Mufhak. He was the Talmud Mufhak of Rav Soloveitchik. And in Nefesh Harav and his other Sfarim, he gives over the Torah of Rav Soloveitchik. He gives all sorts of Divrei Torah and Chidushim of Rav Soloveitchik, as well as stories and anecdotes that are very instructive. And this is one of them. This is a source, an anecdote that I find to be very instructive, and really, I think, sheds a lot of light on our topic this evening. And Rav Shechter writes the following: Pam hayta bivrisk magifat cholera. Once upon a time, cholera reached Brisk. Vilamrot shehi machala hamadbeket meod, or hamidbeket meod. Hora hagon Rabbi Chaim shehakol mechuyavim la'azor le'elu shitalfu berchovot michushat hamachala u'sayem bechol mai de'efshar. And nevertheless, this illness is so contagious. But nevertheless, Rabbi Chaim instructed that people help out those who had collapsed in the street, and help them and assist them in every way and shape possible, right? For those who had collapsed are in a situation of vadai sakana. Their life is in clear danger. Oh, and one who goes to help, he only is involved in or only enters into safek sakana. His life is possibly in danger, but there's no clear and imminent danger because he may or may not contract the illness. The individual in the street, he's contracted the illness. But the one who goes and offers a hand may or may not. Interesting. So with all the precautions that we take, with all the quarantines and lockdowns, how do we allow doctors and nurses and medical professionals treat people? As all of you are aware, I'm sure, many, many medical professionals have become ill with COVID-19. Hashem should give them a refuah shlema. How do we allow doctors to treat people bichlal? Aren't they putting themselves into a sakana? Isn't it prohibited to put oneself into a sakana? I'm not allowed to endanger myself. The value of life is so important. We've talked about this before. Torah says, ma'od, you shall exceedingly guard yourself. We say safek, nefashot lahakel. When it comes, when there's a safek, we always err on the side of caution. And even if I don't know, do they really need to go now on Shabbos to the hospital? We take them. We don't play games. We'll come back to that a little bit later on this evening. Life is so important. So how do we allow a doctor, a nurse, a medical professional, or any individual to save a life when he may endanger himself? So the answer is simple. I'm allowed to enter into safek sakana in order to save someone from vadai sakana. Okay? And he brings the Hagot, Maimoniot here in the name of the Yerushalmi. And he says, concerning these types of cases, a person is obligated, not just that it's permissible. See, that's a machloket, actually. It's beyond the scope of our shir this evening. It's actually a machloket whether we say that it's permissible to enter into safek sakana to save someone, or whether it's required. Okay, but again, that's the machloket. But certainly it's permissible. But here he writes, he takes the position that it's required, and writes that was Rabbi Chaim's position. Rabbi Chaim af halach batzmo v'shalach et banav u'bnei beito l'sayah beholechet or olchat hacholim shenitalfu lebeit hacholim. Rabbi Chaim himself and his children and the members of his household, he instructed them to take people to the hospital, people that were dying from cholera, v'af l'sayam berefuatam, and help them with their treatment. V'chein hora af hagonim Rabbi Chaim, measles, etc., etc., etc. So he gives other examples of this. But I think now we can understand why it was permissible for Rabbi Akiva Eger to roll up his sleeves and get involved. Because he too, like Rabbi Chaim Brisk, felt that you have to get involved. You can't just leave it to the medical professionals, to the doctors, because they're overworked, overtaxed. There's just not enough. You need to be involved. You need to help. And they allowed themselves to get close to people suffering from cholera, suffering from this awful disease, because the halacha allows, and maybe according to some even requires, one to enter into safek sakana to save someone who is in vadai sakana. And I think maybe now we can understand Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. We had examples of great chachamim that warn people from getting close to Balei Ratan, and they themselves wouldn't get close, they wouldn't breathe the same air, they wouldn't eat from the same food, they wouldn't enter the homes. And then we have this account of how Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, lichora, seemingly was cavalier, and how the Gemara seems to say, at least according to Rashi's reading, he would literally sit with the sick and learn Torah and say, can I rely on the Torah to protect me? And maybe we can now understand the Gemara as follows. That Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was postulating that one can put themselves into safek sakana to help those who are in vadai sakana. And maybe Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi He wasn't a doctor. He didn't know how to treat the patients. But you know what he could do? He could go and sit with the ill, the sick people, the Baalei Ratan, and he could open up his Gemara and he could teach them Torah. Because they didn't have Zoom back then. He could go and he could sit with them and he could give them chizuk and offer them words of encouragement. Because he felt that, okay, these people have a disease, they're maybe in a state of vadai sakana, but I'm allowed to put myself into suffix sakana. I may get sick, I may not. And not that I'm going to rely on the Torah to protect me, but I'm going to put my hope and trust that the Torah will protect me. And so rather than reading this Gemara, as some have, that, oh, here's a proof that we can just rely on the Torah and we don't have to shut down the yeshiva and our Torah study will protect us and we don't have to follow the instructions of the state of Israel or its Ministry of Health or what the doctors are saying. Maybe we could read this Gemara as follows. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he was willing to put himself into suffix sakana to help those who were in vadai sakana. And not that he expected the Torah to protect him. He put his hope and trust that the Torah would protect him. I think that's how perhaps we can read this Gemara. But I'd like to move on and show you some other examples of great chachamim, great contemporary poskim and Jewish leaders, and how they responded to epidemics and pandemics and plagues, and how they took responsibility. That brings us here to source number 7. This is from Sefer Tnuat HaMusar, from Harav Dov Katz, where he spends a lot of time speaking about the founder of the Musar movement, Rav Yisrael Salanter. Yisrael Salanter, as you all know, very, very, very important thinker, considered the father of the Musar movement, but he was also a Rav and a posek. And in 1848, when cholera reached Vilna, and this already was the third cholera epidemic or third pandemic, which was from 1846 to 1860. Again, cholera decimated Europe. People don't realize millions died. In 1848 alone, this very year when allegedly this story takes place, in 1848 alone, 1 million people died from cholera in Europe. And so according to this story, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter felt that were people to fast on Yom Kippur, healthy people, it might put them at risk of becoming sick and dying. And according to this story, and it appears in a few different places, a few different books, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter did not record the story himself. And as we'll see in a moment, therefore there's some different variations and girsot on the story. But according to this story, this was in Tafresh Tet, okay? Or actually, Bifros Shnat Tafresh Tet. So it could have been, this was already maybe Tafresh Yud. In any case, the way the author here describes what took place is that basically the cholera epidemic had spread, and the rabbis of Vilna, they did not want to allow people to eat on Yom Kippur. So according to the story, here I'm reading from the second paragraph here, As kam Rabbi Yisrael, so Rabbi Yisrael Salanter got up, vitapech mitzanu avanav l'ge'ev takif. He went from a humble and modest person to a brazen and proud person. He took responsibility. And he went out by himself against the advice of the rabbis of Vilna. Or maybe he considered fasting to be a sin. And normally we consider eating on Yom Kippur a sin. That's punishable with karet. He considered this year fasting to be a sin. He was also concerned, what will the goyim think? Maybe they'll see Jews, getting together in synagogues and praying, and who knows? and they're not doing anything special, they're not changing their behavior, they're still fasting, maybe the Jews caused this disease. Who knows? So what does he do? Be'erev Yom Kippurim Tafresh Tet, Pirsem Modaot Bechol Batei HaKnesiot Shebe'ir. He made signs like Pashkevilin, he publicized in all the synagogues there in Vilna. Lo litanot b'yom hakadosh v'anorazeh. Do not fast on this holy and awesome day. Lekatzer b'piyutim, lelechet l'tayel b'chutzot ha'ir, l'ruach hayom. Right? Say less piyutim, shorten the tefillah. Okay? I'm sure many of you would appreciate that every year. Go outside, get a little air. Help people with your strength, with money. Why? And this is key, where I've underlined. Out of concern that the people might not listen to him. That they might say, wait a minute, how can we eat? It's Yom Kippur. How can we eat on Yom Kippur? It's the holiest day of the year. It's punishable with karet. Allah alabama, bebeit knesset. He got up on the bima of the shul, bebeit knesset Hagadol, the main shul, the great synagogue in Vilna. Right? Kitom tfilat shacharit, following shachris, hotzi yayin v'ugot. He took out some wine and cake. Kidesh v'achal le'enei kol hakahal. And this is the famous story that he made kiddush and he had some wine and cake in front of everyone to show by personal example that this is what the halacha requires. That some years the halacha requires us to fast, and fasting is the mitzvah. But when there's a cholera outbreak, the mitzvah is to eat. That is our avoda today. It's an incredible story. And the story continues that there was controversy, and people were afraid, and people didn't know. And then he even reports that there was a we'll see in a moment. There was a Rav Bitzalel. I don't know if I put it here on the sheets. Oh yeah, one of the Dayanim of Vilna, Rabbi Bitzalel, who was very much against this. We'll see in a moment. But it's not clear exactly how this story took place, or even if it happened, because it wasn't recorded. It was only recorded until many years later, and we really don't know what happened. They say in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Salanter, and here I put on the next page a picture of Rabbi Yitzchak Salanter, his son. Some people mistake this for Rabbi Yisrael Salanter himself, but this is actually his son, Rabbi Yitzchak Salanter. We have a number of his pictures. So say in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Salanter that really he didn't drink a whole revius of wine, and he didn't eat, a whole nice big piece of cake. But he ate pachot mikishiur, and he advised people to eat less than a shiur. Right? That's what we advise people if they can. If the doctor requires them to eat more, they have to eat more. Of course, that's the mitzvah. But some want to minimize the story. Not that they had a whole feast, but instead he just had a little bit, a taste of wine and a taste of cake, and he advised people to eat pachot mikishiur. Or another girsa says that he may have made kiddush, but he did not eat or drink. He gave others to eat and drink, people that were weak, people that were sick. Now, again, if a person is a chole she yesh bo sakana, if their life is in danger, of course they have to eat on Yom Kippur. But the chiddush here is that we're talking about healthy people. And here's the question. Here's the machloket here. The machloket is, do we say that on Yom Kippur, one who is healthy should eat as a preventative measure to prevent him from becoming sick? That is the question. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter felt that healthy people, according to this story, according to one version of the story, that even healthy people may eat on Yom Kippur in order that they not become sick. And we'll come back to that because that is the Nikudat HaMachloket, okay? So another girsa said, no, it wasn't. He only made a kiddush, but he didn't himself eat. He gave others to eat. He put in a side room a little kichel, a little cake or something, where he instructed only those who were weak and possibly were ill and were already maybe a suffix sakana to eat. Okay, but not that chas v'shalom he gave healthy people to eat. And there are others who say this whole story is made up. And even yet others who suggest that this was actually a group of maskilim in Vilna who made up this whole thing, and they forged letters from rabbis in Vilna, really to just cause problems, to just to make a balagan, to prank everyone, and they forged letters from rabbis in Vilna, but this story never took place. So we don't know. What we do know is that we have a tshuva from one of the dayanim in Vilna at the time, whose name was Rabbi B'Tzalel HaKohen, and he writes in his tshuvot Reshit Bikurim. I put here from the Sdei Chemed. The Sdei Chemed brings this in Marechet Yom Kippurim here in source number 8. Okay, the Sdei Chemed is like an encyclopedic compendium, all sorts of fascinating halachic material and information and history. So he writes that in this work, Reshit Bikurim, of this Gaon, this Dayan in Vilna, Rabbi B'Tzalel HaKohen, he testifies here. I'll write it down. Lahodia davar hagadol hazeh ledorot olam. What does he say? That there was a chazakah that alafim urivavot anashim v'nashim tilot lakel, thousands and thousands of men and women in Vilna, Baruch Hashem, praise be to God. Hitanu kulam b'tzom kippur. They all fasted on Yom Kippur in these years. Dishnat tafkuf tzadi bet v'tafresh tet v'tafresh chaf zayin. Right, and tafresh tet is that year that allegedly the story took place, 1848. Yom Kippur tafresh tet, or it could have been already maybe tafresh yud. And he writes that this was known, that B'chol Medinot everyone in this whole area all fasted these years. V'lo kara lahem kol ra'a chalila, and nothing bad happened to them. Chas v'shalom. V'noda zot kimat b'chol olam, and this story was known throughout the world. So according to this source here, this story never took place. Perhaps Rabbi Yisrael Salanter may have suggested it. We don't really know exactly, but according to Rabbi B'Tzalel HaKohen, they fasted those years when there was a cholera epidemic in Vilna. And then this Sdei Chemed brings how in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, in Tafresh Chavav, there was a magefa. Okay, there was a magefa in Ir HaKodesh, Tafresh Chavav, he writes here towards the bottom. And again, there was a question, what to do. You know, they asked, should they fast, shouldn't they fast? They heard that in Europe, there were those, again, perhaps the story of Yisrael Salanter already had traveled and made its way to Yerushalayim. There were those who allowed healthy people to eat on Yom Kippur to prevent them from getting sick. And in the end, it said that they didn't give a clear answer. This is in 1865, Tafresh Chavav. It says in the end, lahorot lo isur v'lo heter. They didn't say it's prohibited, but they didn't say you can eat. All right, didn't give an isur or a heter. Rak tziviti shelo latriach matzibur berov piyutim v'nigunim. The only thing they said is, don't dray out the tefillos. Don't say too many piyutim. Again, as I mentioned, something that many people would want to do in a good year. Whether the story took place or not, or how the story actually took place, what's fascinating is that the story makes its way into the halachic literature and is brought down la halacha in a number of places. First, here at source number 9, this is an excerpt from the Sefer. It's a wonderful little Sefer. If you could see my camera, it's called Lishlosha Be'elul. It was first published in Tafresh Tzadichet for the third Yahrzeit of Pikua'ch, L'Yom HaShana Shlishi. I don't know if there's subsequent printings. This is the original printing. It's a tiny little tract, beautiful thing, all about Rav Kook, different stories and Divrei Torah. And one of the things that's written there, that when Rav Kook was a young rabbi in Zalmo, there was a plague of cholera. And what did he do? He paskined like this story. He took the story at face value, Rav Kook, and paskin like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Shemechuyavim litom achila kalav Yom Kippur mipnei sakana. That everyone is obligated. Again, lashon here is Shemechuyavim. Everyone is obligated to taste a little something, have something small on Yom Kippur because of the danger. The asakein beveit hakneset beit hatfilah.
What?
And Rav Kook did this in shul. Presumably, Rav Kook bichvodo uva'atzmo got up there on the bima in shul on Yom Kippur and made kiddush. L'kiyum chova zo kedina. In order to, again, observe this, l'kiyum chova zo kedina, to establish this or observe this obligation as the din, as the halacha, lest anyone think, I'm going to be frummer than the rabbi. It's dafka the rabbi that did it. As an example, the rabbi is the example. V'kal astu al piv be'emat tzidkato kedushato alehem v'ashpat divrei kodsho al kedushat chova zo v'shachuta l'chol avodat hayom. And it's interesting the way it's being described here. It's the kal acted in a holy way through Rav Kook's holiness, out of dread, but because of the holiness and sanctity of Rav Kook, it was a hashpah on them. His sanctity, it influenced them, and it influenced the avoda of the day. Ubenilat Hayom Kippur, or Benilat Hayom HaKadosh, actually, because it's a cool funny. Benilat Hayom HaKadosh patach et Aron HaKodesh. This is incredible. They opened up the ark, right, at Ne'ilah, v'ishbia b'sefer Torah et kol HaKahal, and Rav Kook himself made the entire kahal swear. Wow. He made everyone swear that they are going to go home after the fast and they're going to break their fast and eat their bread with simcha, with joy, and without any fear. Because you could imagine the pangs of guilt that they must be facing or feeling. Incredible. Incredible. I've experienced this in my own small way. Not that I ever made kiddush on Yom Kippur, but I've had people that I've told them, look, you are required to eat on Yom Kippur. You have to take this medicine, or you have this particular condition. You're required to eat. You are required to drink. And it's very difficult for them. And they say, but Rabbi, are you sure maybe I could do shiurim? Well, let's speak with the doctor. Is shiurim sufficient, or do you need more hydration, or do you need more food for this medication in this window of time? And I've even had people who've told me that they fear that if they eat on Yom Kippur, something bad is going to happen to them. That they have this feeling that, all my life I kept Yom Kippur, I didn't eat, I fasted, I davened, and now all of a sudden I have to eat, and chas v'shalom, my judgment hangs in the balance, and my year hangs in the balance, and this is the Gemar Din, and this is the Chasima, and what's going to be this year if I eat? And I tell them that for you, the mitzvah is to eat. Last year, the mitzvah was for you to fast. This year, your mitzvah on Yom Kippur is to eat. Hashem wants you to eat. That's your avoda. That's your avodah. That's Yom Kippurim. And so here, Rav Kook is telling the people, after Yom Tov, go home and break your fast and don't feel guilt because you did the right thing. But what's interesting, and why Rav Bitzalel HaKohen and others disagreed with Rav Yisrael Salanter, is because there's a machloket whether a healthy person can eat on Yom Kippur, or the dispensation is just for someone who is in clear and imminent danger. A chole sheyesh bo sakana. Surely he eats on Yom Kippur. But again, what about someone who is healthy? Do we say that he can eat in order to prevent himself from contracting the illness? That is the machloket. And we don't have the time to read it together this evening. I'm trying to move a little quickly. But what's fascinating is this story about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter is brought down la halacha here in source number 10, in a tshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein, where he rules that, yes, in certain circumstances, a healthy person can eat on Yom Kippur, or a healthy person can be mechalel Shabbos here, and because there's a concern that if he doesn't do something, if he's not mechalel Shabbos, he may contract the illness, right? And there's a concern, and by the way, here, we didn't see it together, but in that passage from Nefesh Harav, he also discusses how Rabbi Chaim said to people they could be mechalel Shabbos to get their family out of the city when there was a cholera outbreak, or to send a telegram, or to get word, okay? Again, because in a case where there's a safek sakana, we go lahakel, we go lakula, and we say, or Moshe Feinstein here rules that to prevent a healthy person from becoming ill. Again, we talk about Piku'ach Nefesh being doche Shabbos. Piku'ach Nefesh overrides Shabbos, and generally we talk about a chole sheyesh bo sakana, a person whose life is in danger, or a chole she'ein bo sakana, a person who's ill, but it's not a life-threatening illness. But what about someone who is 100% healthy and well? But if they are not mechalel Shabbos, they will become sick. They will contract the illness. So Rav Moshe rules, again, like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And he brings this story here where I bolded, down in this short little tshuva here. He brings it down, V'yadua shagon Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, tziva b'shasha machalata kolera mitpashetet. When cholera was breaking out, he commanded, lechol b'yom kippurim kol b'nei ha'ir, that all the members of the city have to eat. Mishum shalarayvim yoter aluli dabek behem afshayu bri'im kidei shelo chalu. Even healthy people have to eat in order that they not become sick, that they don't contract the illness. So he brings the story down the halacha, as does Rav Neuvert here in the Shmirat Shabbat Kilcheta in source number 11 in Perek Lamed Gimel. And he brings it down. He says you can go and you can drive to a hospital and violate Shabbos. Even if a person's healthy, but there's a concern that they might become sick, they might contract the illness, they can break Shabbos, and he cites in the footnotes there about this Maaseh Etzel Rabbi Yisrael Salant. Okay, so it's incredible, this story, how it's brought down lahalacha.
It says you can drive.
Any questions, by the way, before we continue? So here we saw examples from Chazal, how they would warn people, right? How Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Zeira, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi taught people how to conduct themselves. How Rabbi Shua Levi would sit with the sick people in a way I want to read the Gemara, would learn Torah with them, teach them, offer words of chizuk, learn himself, be there, be a presence. Okay, support them. Saw tshuva from Rabbi Kiva Eger, how he's instructing with Elio Gutmacher how to proceed, giving medical advice, also how to proceed with the shul and minyanim and what to daven, offering spiritual advice and medical advice as well. Wear this around your stomach. Don't eat pickled foods. Don't eat this. This is dangerous for you. He rolled up his sleeves and got involved, as did Reb Chaim. They took responsibility. As did Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, as did many others, as did Rav Kook here. They took responsibility. Last night, Rav Yair shared with us how it's well known that Rav Aryeh Levin wouldn't just visit the prisoners. He's famous for being the father to the prisoners, the rabbi to the prisoners, but he would also visit the lepers. He would visit with the lepers in the leper colony of Talbiah. Why wasn't he afraid of getting sick? Again, because as we saw, one can put themselves into safek sakana to help those in vaday sakana. Yeah, but what can he do? He wasn't a doctor, but his presence there, offering words of encouragement, offering chizuk, that's what he could do. So many examples of great rabbis who took responsibility and provided for the needs and care and offered guidance during difficult times. And that's what a rabbi is supposed to do. That brings us to source number 12, the Gemara in Masechet Yoma. So as you all know, the Mishnah at the end of Yoma, the Gemara there, talks about Piku'ach Nefesh. Right? It talks about eating on Yom Kippur, Piku'ach Nefesh. So after discussing some of the rules of Piku'ach Nefesh, the Gemara there says, Ve'eno sin dvarim halalu, where I've underlined here in source number 12. Ve'eno sin dvarim halalu, lo al yidei nochrim, lo al yidei kutim, ela al yidei gedolei Yisrael. The Gemara says you don't do these things, meaning you don't violate the Shabbos through a Gentile, rather only through, as the Gemara says, Gedolei Yisrael. So what does that mean? How would you define what the Gemara means by Gedolei Yisrael here? Any suggestions?
It could mean not a katan.
Yes, and that's how good, and that's how many Rishonim explain the Gemara, right? We're talking about don't do it by a Gentile or a child, because they're going to delay in the treatment of this patient, or they're going to bring about a delay. They're not going to act quickly. The Gentile, okay, might not be motivated. You have to appreciate the time that this Gemara is being written. Nowadays, we have Gentile doctors who save Jewish lives. I was just reading something about Gentile doctors and nurses who are saying the Shema with dying patients in New York because their family cannot be with them. So difficult, so painful. The period that we're going through now. Families cannot be with their loved ones as they are leaving this world to say the Shema with them. Rabbis cannot be with their congregants to say the Shema and the Vidui with them before they leave this world. So I was reading how doctors, non-religious doctors, Gentile doctors are saying Shema. The rabbi's on the phone with the doctor, putting the phone by the ear of the patient. So many Rishonim understand the Gemara to mean don't do it through a child, because a child is going to take his time. He's not going to realize the immediacy here. But take a look at how the Rambam reads this Gemara. It's incredible. He reads Gedolei Yisrael as Gedolei Yisrael, the Gedolim. It's Dafka the rabbis. And he writes the following here in source number 13. In Hilchot Shabbat Perek Bet, Kishe'osim dvarim ha'elu, אין עושים אותן לא על ידי גויים ולא על ידי קטנים ולא על ידי עבדים ולא על ידי נשים, כדי שלא תהיה שבת קלה בעיניהם, אלא על ידי גדולי ישראל וחכמיהם. The Rambam says it's Dafka the rabbi, who's supposed to break Shabbos to save the patient. Now, even the Rambam would admit that if the rabbi's not there, you don't go and find a rabbi to save a patient's life. But what does the Rambam here mean? Why does the Rambam read this Gemara? Ali de Gedolei Yisrael, not that it's referring to an adult, but referring to the Gedolei Yisrael, the rabbis. What does the Rambam mean? So I put here in source number 14 as the last source we'll look at together this evening. The Tashbeitz, Shimon ben Tzemach Duran. Tashbeitz, he writes in a tshuva about Pikua'ch Nefesh. He explains the Rambam. By the way, he disagrees with the Rambam. He says, like I said before, we don't wait for rabbis. Anyone should act. Anyone should do anything. And by the way, even the Ramah Paskins in Shulchan Aruch that if a child or a Gentile is going to act quickly, you can rely on the child or the Gentile. You can ask them to do it, because there's a whole question of whether we should try and minimize the Isur as much as possible. It goes to Machloket, we spoke about just a few nights ago, whether Shabbat is Hutra or Dechuya, whether Shabbat is completely pushed off when there's a sick person, or if we only make certain accommodations if Shabbat is suspended, in which case maybe we want to minimize the Isur, and maybe then we actually want to have a Gentile or a Katan call the hospital or call the ambulance or do something in order to minimize the Isur. And it seems to be that we try to minimize the Isur so long as it doesn't affect the efficacy or the treatment of the individual or the speed at which the individual is treated. So here, the Tashbeitz argues on the Rambam, but he explains the Rambam. And he explains the Rambam with the Yerushalmi here. Here it's Shekach Amru Yerushalmi, Hazariz Harei Ze Meshubach. Someone who is quick, they are praised. Someone who acts quickly. You see a person who's sick, you act quickly, the Yerushalmi says. And that individual is praised. V'hanish'al Harei Ze Meguneh. But a person who is asked, interesting, who is asked, he is meguneh, he is disgusting. I don't know what's a better word maybe in this context. He's not favored here, okay? Meguneh usually means like disgusting. Maybe he's like matchil bignut, it's negative. It's negative. One who is asked. The hashoel, someone who has to ask the question, harei ze shofech damim. Someone who has to ask the question, he is akin to someone who has spilled blood. He's compared to a murderer. Now, how do we understand this Yerushalmi? Certainly the first passage has the Riz Harei Meshubach. The first statement of the Yerushalmi is understandable. Person who acts quickly, they get a lot of praise. Kol hakavod. Certainly we can understand why Hashoel, someone who needs to ask a question, right? Someone who's got to ask a question, why that would be bad, why that might be akin to murder, meaning he's taking his time, and meanwhile, the patient can die. We could see why asking a question when it's not time for questions and it's time to act, we could see why that would be negative. But why do we blame someone who's asked the question? Vanishal harei ze meguneh. Why is that unsavory or negative? Any suggestions? Don't all answer at once.
I would say we're talking about someone who starts to give an answer, even though it just says hanishal.
But that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says vehanishal, one who is asked.
Right. So it could be. I could think of two things. One is that obviously it's a rabbi, and he hasn't sufficiently instructed his congregation.
Yes.
And you could also say that if he just says, do it, without opening up Sfarim and starting Pipulim and stuff like that, he's not Meguneh, and though it's not clear.
Okay. So I think we have to ask the question, who is the Nishal? Who is the Nishal? So the Tashbetz wants to say that according to the Rambam, and this is why the Rambam interprets the Bavli the way we saw he does, and adds Gedolei Yisrael, the Chachmeihem, right, in the language of the Rambam. According to the Tashbetz, the Rambam is saying that the Nishal is the rabbi. That's how the Rambam reads the Yerushalmi here. The Nishal is the rabbi. And why is he indicted? Why is he unsavory? Why do we say the Hanishal harei ze meguneh? Someone who is asked? Because what it means is someone who has to be asked.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Someone who has to be asked. It implies that the rabbi hasn't done his job. He hasn't sufficiently instructed his kehila as to the laws of Pikua'ch Nefesh, that life is so precious that we don't play around, that we say safek nefashos lahakel. I'm trying to translate that into Hebrew. Safek nefashot lahakel. Safek nefashot lahakel. We err on the side of caution. We don't play around. And even if we don't know, is this really dangerous? Is a person really going to die? We don't play around. We call Hatzalah. We call Magen David Adom. We call Achodesh Harnof. We treat this patient. We don't play around. And so the rabbi, the Nishal, the one who is asked, he's indicted. He's doing something wrong here. He is guilty. He's guilty for the sin of having to be asked, of not successfully teaching his kehila, his tzibur, his community, how to behave. That the Torah values life. V'chai bahem, as the Gemara in Sanhedrin Yuma says, v'lo she'amut bahem. We live by the Torah. It's a Torah of life. Life is so precious. And so that's why it's dafka the rabbi. And so the Tashbetz continues and says, "Perusha inyan ze lefi she'Torah amra asher yasa otam adam v'chai behem." Perush Chazal, v'chai behem v'lo shemut behem. The Gemara that I quoted. Im kein Shabbat linyan sakat nefashot harei zehi d'chuya o muteret. He touches on again that machloket that I mentioned, whether we say that Shabbat is completely pushed off or just suspended, the nafkamina being or one of the nafkamina, we try to minimize the isur. There are other nafkamina. We touched on that the other night. The Rambam has such lashon that for the sick person, Shabbos is a weekday. Someone who acts quickly, the Yerushalmi says he's to be praised because we're dealing with sakanat nefashot. But the rabbi that needs to be asked, and and he fafumfers and he looks for the Gemara and he has to find a head there, that is not good. He's criticized. Even if maybe he allows others when he's asked, but since he himself doesn't act, in other words, why does he even have to instruct? The way that Dashbeit is explaining it, why doesn't he himself pick up the phone? Why doesn't he himself get in the car and drive? Like we saw Rabbi Akiva Eger did, like we saw Rabbi Chaim Brisk did, and many others. Person who first has to ask a shaila, shelat chacham, and then he gets ahead there and he waits, he's compared to someone who spills blood, who is a murderer. Because the patient may die in the meanwhile. We say anyone who's quick and acts first, he merits it. This is incredible what he writes here. And don't worry about Chilul Shabbos. Don't worry about desecrating the Sabbath. Shakadosh Baruch Hu is here b'mitzvot Shabbat hu tziva l'chalol l'tzorech sakanat nefashot. Because the same God, the same Hashem, the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded the mitzvah of Shabbos, he commanded you to desecrate the Shabbos to save a life. It's a tremendous zchut shehitzil nefesh achat miYisrael, to save one life. ומוטב שחלל שבת אחת כדי שיחיה זה החולה ויקיים שבתות הרבה ולא ישמות החולה ולא יקיים שבתות כלל. There's a famous Gemara. A famous Gemara that says, Chalel alav Shabbat achat, violate one Sabbath, kidei sheyishmor Shabbatot harbe, in order that he observed many Sabbaths. And so according to the Rambam, it's dafka the rabbi, because he needs to instruct his community how to behave. It's his responsibility. It once happened to me. I was an assistant rabbi, or associate rabbi in the Orthodox synagogue in Omaha, Nebraska. And in the middle of shul, there's an older man who, Pashut, just passed out. He falls on the floor and collapses. And no one knows what to do. And I remember this Rambam and this Yerushalmi, and this Dashbeit, and I run into my office and I pick up the phone and I dial 911 and I call an ambulance and I explain to them where we are. I'm trying to get the words out, and I feel so good about myself. Wow! Give myself a pat on the back. Here I am, following in the words of the Rambam, the way the Rambam explains the Bavli, the way the Rambam understands the Yerushalmi, that it's dafka the rabbi who's supposed to get on the phone and call the ambulance, and I feel so good about myself. And then they tell me on the phone, oh yes, thank you, we've already been made aware, we've already been reported. And then I realize that about half of the members sitting there in shul have cell phones in the pockets. They define orthodoxy a little bit different in the Midwest. It had already been reported. But, we place such a tremendous value on human life. And yet, sometimes when it comes to being Mechalel Shabbos, or when it comes to having to eat on Yom Kippur, or when it comes to having to eat chametz on Pesach, because that's what's required, because your medicine is chametz, and that's what the doctor tells you, and that's what the rabbi tells you, we become frum. We're too frum. We're verfrumt. We're just too frum. We don't want to listen to the rabbi. Rabbi, don't give me any of your hetes. I've shared it with you before. But Rabbi Chaim Brisk, who we spoke about this evening, would often say, people come and tell him that he's a mekil. He's lenient when it comes to Shabbos, to Chilul Shabbos. He says, no, it's not that I'm lenient when it comes to Chilul Shabbos. I'm machmir. I'm stringent in the mitzvah of Pikua'ch Nefesh. But it's dafka the rabbi that needs to send this message through clear and to the point, and needs to articulate this message. It's dafka the rabbi, because sometimes people are too frum, as I've shared with you before. I've had people who I've told, you have to eat on Yom Kippur. They say, but Rabbi, I feel like something's bad's going to happen to me. I'm going to be punished if I have to eat on Yom Kippur. Or I once had this woman, when I was a rabbi in Connecticut, member of my shul, and incredible family, real Tzionim, and all of their sons, even though they live in the United States, they live in suburban Connecticut, all of their sons have served in Tzahal. They've all served in the army, each and every one of them. And at the time, one of their sons was serving. One of their sons had already come back, and she told me, she confided in me, and she said, Rabbi, I have this fear that if I eat on Yom Kippur this year, something bad is going to happen to my son who's over in Israel protecting the state of Israel. And I told her, I said, look, I understand your fear, and I'm not dismissing it. But I want you to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not chas v'shalom going to punish you for doing this, because this is what he wants you to do. This is Ritzon Hashem. Devar Hashem zo halacha. And if the halacha says to eat on Yom Kippur, that's Ritzon Hashem. That's what God wants from you. That's what God wants from you. That is your avodah this year. Last year, your avodah was to fast. This year, your avodah is to eat on Yom Kippur, as strange as that sounds. But that's how you're going to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu this year. And as we saw this evening, Baruch Hashem, throughout Jewish history, we've had so many great poskim, great rabbis, great Jewish leaders with tremendous sensitivity and tremendous heroism and strength and faith. They guided their community. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we're supposed to do. I have someone who keeps calling me with all sorts of shilas. Rabbi, I'm sure you're so busy. I'm sure you're so busy. I say, actually, all right, well, maybe a little bit more busy. I've been teaching more this week and last than in the last few months, I think. Baruch Hashem, having classes every night for the shul, and I've been teaching for the OU Center in the morning, and giving a Gemara class that I give, and giving other shurim, but I'm here to answer your questions. Don't feel like you're burdening me or bothering me, chas v'shalom. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And I'm not chas v'shalom putting myself in the category of Rabbi Kiva Eger or Rabbi Yisrael Salanter or Rabbi Chaim Brisker or Rav Kook or Rav Aryeh Levin. But Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael has had incredible Gedolei Torah who have guided us, have with tremendous strength and heroism instructed us on how to get through difficult times. And Mitzvah Hashem, we will get through this very difficult time. I'll take any questions. Please, you can unmute yourselves and ask any questions. Yes, Dr. Paz.
First of all, fabulous topic and fantastic Mokorot. Can you all hear me?
I agree.
With you.
Yeah. Just 2 points. One is maybe, I'm not sure, but as you mentioned, Rabbi Akiva Eger was the father of the Khatam Sofer, who was a member of the Polish Parliament. So maybe it could be that when he told them to mention it in his name to the authorities, he perhaps had the backing of parliamentarian. That's point number one.
Yes, I failed to mention that point. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Thank you. Yes, that's very important.
Because my wife is a direct descendant of both of them, I know the topic quite well. That's number one.
We've spoken about this. We've spoken about this in your sukkah.
Number two.
He never stops.
Number two. I think the first heter to eat before Tkiat Shofar on Rosh Hashanah was during the same period, and was also came through the Khatam Sofer Rabbi Akiva Eger to the heter to eat before Tkiat Shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Just two other points, perhaps. One is that I understand the heter of Rabbi Salanter. I mean, cholera is a dramatic illness. It comes on very quickly and is it presents itself with dramatic watery diarrhea, and people can dehydrate within hours, 2 or 3 hours, because the amount of diarrhea is dramatic. So certainly I understand that those heterim, why a healthy person should in fact rehydrate himself, because if indeed he started with that form of secretory, watery diarrhea, he could really be in sakana very, very quickly. The fourth point about the leper and Rabbi Levine, leprosy today is not contracted by a casual contact. You have to be in contact with somebody for weeks or years to contract it. So just to put the record straight on that.
Okay.
And Yeshua Koch, a wonderful shiur and a fabulous makrut. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anyone else? Questions, comments, complaints?
I wanted to mention that the letter of Rabbi Akiva was Parshat Nitzavim. It's maybe like 3 weeks before Yom Kippur.
That's
So
also
even though we didn't mention,
that's also an interesting
it was
point. Yeah. How they dealt with Yom Kippur. I don't know. It's an interesting point. Yeah.
And we had a case many years ago in the show where somebody passed out on Rosh Hashanah. And I think Dr. Paz may have been one of the people who ran running over to him. I remember Dr. Burko was one. Were you there then, Julian?
Yeah, it was Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, I think it was Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, many years ago.
Yeah, it actually happened happened to me another time as well when I was in Connecticut. Unfortunately, it happens. And you know, we don't play games. We can't play games. And I think that the Jewish leaders who perhaps took a little too long to respond to this current pandemic, I think that maybe you know, they can look to some of the great Tzaddikim and Gonim and Poskim and Rabbanim that we mentioned this evening together, for possible to take a possible cue to see how, you know, how other rabbis were willing to make tremendous sacrifices and were willing to really go out on a limb and to take a stand. You know, we were one of the first shuls in the neighborhood to close. It was before the Misrad B'riyut closed shuls. It was before the Rabbanut HaRashit had even come out with their letter to shuls on how to proceed. And so we closed, I think, on a Monday or Tuesday, and the Rabbanut came out with their letter only on the following Thursday. And so people said, oh, look, the Rabbanut say you can have minyanim, just stand 2 meters apart from one another, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, to me it was clear. Safek nefashot lahakel. We don't take chances. We don't play games. We err on the side of caution. That is, in my opinion, the spirit of our Masoret. Yes. Anyone else? Any other questions, comments?
Thank you. Excellent shir.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I will wish you all a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. You know, we say a Pesach Kasher v'Sameach or a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. We don't take for granted that it be both Kasher and Sameach. For some people, it's going to be Kasher but not Sameach. Other people, you know, I actually once heard maybe a Hasidic kvetch on it, that we say Chag Kasher v'Sameach because even for a person who, because of Pikua'ch Nefesh, has to eat chametz on Pesach, his medication is chametz, and he has to eat chametz on Pesach, for him it's kasher. But it might not be sameach because he might not be happy with the fact that he has to eat chametz for his health on this Pesach. As I mentioned, it's difficult for people to have to eat on Yom Kippur if that's what is required of them, but that's difficult. It's challenging. So you wish someone a chag kasher v'sameach, someone who chas v'shalom is sick, and for him it's going to still be kasher, even though what he's eating is not kasher. But for him, since it's Pikua'ch Nefesh, it's kasher, but he might not be sameach. So dafka for him, you got to say it's sameach. So we wish you all a happy and healthy Pesach. And I look forward to seeing you, Mitzvah Hashem, next time soon, Bekarov, in the flesh, in real life, in the present, together once again in our beautiful shul, our beautiful Mikdash Ma'at, and may we merit a real geula, a real redemption this year. And Yeshua Hashem Kiheref Ayin, the salvation of God and redemption can come in the blink of an eye. So Mitzvah Hashem, we should merit redemption and salvation speedily, and health for all of us.
Amen.